Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So we had an interesting situation with a delisting of games from Ubisoft on the Steam store yesterday, as well as many people are starting to ask, where did that Goldeneye 007 Nintendo 64 game re-release end up at? We have those topics and others to cover, but before we get started, if you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't yet, consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell so we can keep you up to date with all the latest gaming news. Now let's get started. First, we had a really odd situation develop over the course of the day yesterday from Ubisoft. Now, if you remember, we had that story last week about how movies got removed from the PlayStation store in Germany, and I believe it was Austria, and these are movies that you'd already purchased and they were just going to be removed from your library. Well, it looked like we were having something similar develop that way in the Steam store. First, let's look at this headline that came from Games Radar when this all first started. Ubisoft confirms 4 delisted Steam games aren't coming back. Now, it's not uncommon for games to no longer be sold in the store, but this was appearing to be that the games wouldn't even be able to be re-downloaded if you already owned them. If you look at the second notice here from the Steam store on Assassin's Creed Liberation HD, it says, please note this title will not be accessible following September 1st, 2022. Now, this was pretty much blowing up everywhere, and I think Ubisoft was actually one of the top trends on Twitter yesterday. And we even had people pointing out they had put this game for sale at a 75% discount. Well, Ubisoft didn't do themselves any favors. By the first response that they had to this, it said, we don't take the decision to retire services or older Ubisoft games lightly, and our teams are currently assessing all available options for players who will be impacted when these games' online services are decommissioned on September 1st, 2022. No, they had a little more information after this, but the key here most people were taking is that it said that they were retiring services for older Ubisoft games. And many people took that meaning that they would not be able to play the game at all. Some people pointing maybe to the DRM services, but later in the day they finally clarified and added to their statement saying, only DLCs and online features will be affected by the upcoming decommissioning. Current owners of those games will still be able to access, play, or re-download them. Our teams are working with our partners to update this information across all storefronts and are also assessing all available options for players who will be impacted when these games' online services are decommissioned on September 1st, 2022. So this statement made it a lot more clear that yes, the offline components will still be available. But this does bring to point that any of these games that you buy digitally, you don't own them, you just have a license to them, and that can be revoked at any time. Now, technically, the same thing is true with physical media. You still are just buying a license, but it's a lot harder for them to revoke that physical copy that you have. But it's good to see this at least had a happy ending, but it is definitely a tale of caution. Next, a few weeks ago we talked about how it was looking like Goldeneye 007 was going to come to the Xbox and maybe even possibly the Switch in some form. We had those achievements that were actively being achieved by somebody, and we wonder what happened to that. We've had the Xbox Showcase come and go, we've had the Nintendo Partner Direct come and go, and still no announcement. Well, we sort of have an update from a games journalist that's generally correct on these things. Somebody asked Jeff Grubb on Twitter what happened to this, and his response here is GoldenEye is still in limbo because of the war. And then he adds here about another game that was inquired about, 1 vs 100s, but it looks like this game has been kind of put on the back burner, and we saw that same thing happen with Advance Wars 1 and 2 Reboot Camp. So it looks like with Goldeneye having a lot of settings in Russia and fighting the Russians, that maybe they thought it might be better to hold off on releasing this right now. So who knows when we'll see an official release of this Xbox 360 remake version, or maybe even the original Nintendo 64 version. But I wouldn't lose hope. I have a feeling if they've spent this much time in getting it ready, we'll eventually get to see it. And I feel I would be remiss if I didn't at least cover this topic a little bit, even though it's a lot of speculation. So about 4 months ago, we had the first wave of DLC for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe get released. And we're supposed to get 6 waves of DLC ending in 2023. Well, we have this interesting ad here from 7-Eleven in Japan, and if you look in the upper right hand corner, there's a date here of when this ad is supposed to be pulled, and it has July 17th of this year. Well, many people are speculating that that's going to be the date that we see the next wave get announced. While I'm not hopeful that we'll see it that day, it may very well fall that week after. There is a history of Smash characters getting announced right after these ads expire at the 7-Elevens in Japan. Also, if you take into account that there's 6 waves of DLC, and if you space all those out about 4 months, that would get us right to the end of 2023, and it would also mean that we should be seeing Wave 2 get released sometime this month. Now obviously Wave 2 is going to get announced at some point in time, so I usually don't look too much into this type of speculation, but the very fact that these 7-Eleven ads in the past have lined up with announcements for new Smash characters, I just thought it would be at least interesting to take a look at this and see if this does come to fruition. And that's all we have for today. Did anything we cover catch your attention? Are you surprised that Goldeneye hasn't been released yet in some form or another? And does an all-digital future concern you? Do you think you may lose access to games that you once owned, or at least thought you owned? Drop a comment about those topics or anything else we covered today. I want to thank you for watching, and be good.